He's not behind the wheel, but he's across every delivery. Hello, I'm Shane Jacobson, and this is How You're Travelling, a podcast from Healthy Heads. Today, I'm joined by Rick, a supply chain leader who's turning policies into real care on the ground. From fatigue tech to culture change, Rick's seen it all. Rick, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Shane. Great to be here.
So thank you so much for coming in, mate. I have to start by asking, how are you travelling?
Actually, travelling reasonably well. Been pretty challenged over the last little while with a bit of stuff happening on at work and been moving house and those sorts of things as well, and not really wasn't really quite as aware of how impactful that is on your day life. So it's just another one thing to notch up in experience, to say, okay, it's another thing that's potentially going to cause some change of routine, and everyone likes their routine and those sorts of things. But all through that, had great support through that. So yeah, I'm feeling really well. How about yourself?
Mate, you know what? No one's every time I've asked that, no one on this show's asked me. I'm okay. I'm good. We're about being honest. We want to prove to people that we're about telling the truth. I recently suffered a loss only a very short while ago of a very close mate. So it's been a big. Mate, it's great to have you here, and because you come from such a unique standpoint, if you will, in that we've been talking a lot, both on the podcast and in the background with research, to warehouse workers and truck drivers. But you kind of really are the meat and the sandwich, because you do both. You manage both, don't you? It's a distribution warehouse where you're in charge of the truck drivers plus the warehouse and the logistics. So you really do cover both, don't you, really?
Well, sort of. In my history, I've looked after a lot of manufacturing, which has had a lot of warehousing and distribution components to it. My current role looks after the transport component solely, but I do have a lot of interaction with the warehouse. So I'm based on the DC sites.
Yeah.
And we also get involved in the store delivery component as well. So
you know this space very, very well, don't you? That's why.
Had a fair few years.
Yeah, I'm gonna call you an expert.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you.
Well, you know more than me, and that's why we've got you here. So let's the things that there's a few things that you're, I'm going to say, a warrior for or a voice for, and it's safety on the roads for the drivers. Fatigue is one of the things. There's substance abuse or use, but there's fatigue's one of the big things you battle. Can you talk about that space and what you're doing to help in that space?
Yeah, sure. Look, that's an easy one to talk to, because I'm really passionate around that, and there's a lot of things that can be done in that space. So having the background that I've had, one of my roles was looking after the line haul drivers, so the long distance ones, and particularly they have a lot of hours behind the wheel, which can be quite isolated. So there's isolation in that period, but there's also concerns or challenges for them with respect to fatigue. So it's a similar sort of task. It can be quite sort of sedentary, but they need to be quite alert and awake, because they've got a very important role to do. So certainly fatigue for them is something that's top of mind for all of the drivers, and there's a lot of different tools and techniques and things that they can do. And I've seen some ways that organisations have been able to assist the drivers in that, particularly with some pretty cool technology to be able to monitor them.
Yeah, can you tell us about that technology? I mean, am I right? There are cameras that kind of can tell when they're nodding off. That's how it works, isn't it? Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I said, it's pretty cool sort of tech where the camera's inward facing, takes a bit of a look at where the person is, focuses on the eyes, and then it's able to actually detect where there's distraction. So someone's looking away and not actually looking ahead at the road ahead, or if they've got droopy eyelids or anything else like that, and if they actually shut their eyes. So it monitors that, checks that against its own sort of IP and database for that. And if someone's starting to nod off, it actually sends them an alert. There's usually an alarm that goes off, and in some instances a seat vibration as well. Keeps a bit of a camera shot of that, and then it usually sends a note back to base where someone's actually physically 24 hours on the back of that call to say, actually, we've just had this incident. Can you get in contact with this particular driver?
Wow. Is it too sensitive? Is it not sensitive? Is it one of those things where the alarm can go off a lot? Can it be a distraction in some ways? But it's a life-saving measure. But as we know, sometimes things can be a little bit each way.
Oh, absolutely. No, I think it's a really good point, and that was certainly the case in the early stages and when you're setting it up. So the different models of vehicles have got to be set up differently. But look, when you've got a driver pool that understands why that's getting done, they go through, I guess, the learning process for that, go through the parameter setups because nearly everything's configurable. And then when you get it set up, it does become incredibly accurate
Right.
and incredibly helpful.
It's one of those things where, like any rule or change or bit of tech, that even if it was a little bit frustrating, the fact that its ultimate aim is to save your life or serious injury, the risk versus reward is pretty obvious that it's well worth having in place, isn't it?
Yeah, look, the key thing for me was that we would when we were introducing it, talking to the drivers, and they understood the intent. Their concern was it going to be used for anything other than what we proposed it was going to be used for, which was safety around fatigue. And as we progressed with it and we sort of demonstrated that that was the only cause for it, got really good support for it.
Yeah, great.
And it was really well adopted by them. And I've seen it become pretty much a standard with a lot of carriers, and also a lot of organisations that hire those carriers do mandate that to be tech to be sitting in the equipment now.
In the vehicles to keep the driver. Yes, obviously keeps the goods they're hauling safe, but that's not the main focus, is it? It's looking after the humans that are driving the trucks, you know.
Absolutely. The really interesting thing around that was when you have drivers that have had micro sleeps or episodes when they feel like they actually haven't. So there are instances where people have said, no, I don't agree that we've actually had that. And so we'll come inside and have a look at this video footage that we've got of you. Then they've seen it and then realised that they've actually got an issue and have then sought help for people like for sleep apnea specialists, etc., to try and help get them through that.
So that was a bit I was going to touch on. Now you've got us there smoothly. Great segue. You're doing my job for me because I have sleep apnea. Not a great sleeper. Have been driving cars and trucks for a while. Not as a professional truck driver, if you will. Having said that, I operate some trucks and have spent a fair bit of time behind the wheel. But just as a human being on the road, be it truck or car, I've got to put my hand up. Many years ago, before I had children, I was burning the candle at both ends with the amount of jobs I had. I was singing in bands and working jobs and everything else. And it was, as was expressed to me once, I burn the candle at both ends, and in between times, I store the candle in the oven on 180. So I was tired, and even before I had sleep apnea, I was just getting like 4 hours sleep a day, 4 to 6. And I had many moments where I didn't know I'd gone to sleep, and when I open my eyes, I'm on the road in control of a vehicle. And when I say that happened a lot, it happened so often back then that I'm embarrassed to confess that I had multiple car accidents. I didn't hurt myself, and I didn't hurt anyone else. Thank goodness. Thank God, or thank whoever I need to, because it didn't happen. But every time it happened, I didn't know it was about to happen. That's the thing, isn't it? It's like any accident, whether you caused it or not. The reason you didn't avoid it is you didn't know it was coming, and that's the case with falling asleep behind the wheel. I know you can get drowsy, and some people are trying to push the limits, but sometimes, as you're suggesting, it can happen without you knowing. It just turns up or creeps up, if you will.
Yeah, look, a really good point you've made. So there are instances where people can feel it coming, and I know I've certainly done interstate driving and that sort of thing. And at times you think, okay, I need to take a break because I can actually tell I'm starting to get fatigued. And anyone that's having those, you definitely encourage them to sort of pull over and have that break. But there are some instances with individuals, particularly if they do suffer a sleep apnea, that they don't actually notice it coming, and they have the micro sleeps. And when you're doing 100 kilometres an hour with a prime mover and trailers towing on the back of it, you can actually go a lot of distance in a short period of time.
Yeah.
And very, very dangerous. So it is interesting that, some of them did not even, as I said, didn't believe that they'd actually had the incident once the technology had actually picked it up. But I'd not had one then refute it once they'd actually seen the video footage of the event. And
where clearly their eyes were closed for a portion of time.
Absolutely. Usually closed and that their head sort of goes down, and then you see them wake up when the alarm and the seat vibrates. You can actually physically see them just getting jolted awake and alert. So it's very, very powerful footage to do that. And particularly with a lot of the drivers who've been around for a fair period of time and technology was sort of new to them, it wasn't something that was easily adopted
or accepted.
Yeah. but once it had some, I guess the best user adoption and thing that did it was actually having a couple of people that had gone through that process and them telling their mates that, hey, by the way, I did have this as an issue. And they were able to get help around it and get it resolved. So therefore, they were able to continue doing what they were doing, but they were doing it in a safer manner. So it was great.
And so the people listening now would be going, we're talking about people falling asleep behind the wheel. How does that associate or relate to mental health? And the reason we're having this chat is the next thing that happens is that this happens if people know they're going to get tired and they pull into it. There's a few things we want them to do, and I'll get you to step through those just to remind people or to tell people who don't know that the steps to take to avoid that kind of stuff, other than relying on the tech. There are other things they can do before that. But we know what happens is that what I used to do is I'd then go, oh, okay, well, I'm too tired, and I'd get out and I'd go to a roadhouse and you'd go in and you get, a can of Coke and you go and get some dim sims or a burger or something that's not quite great for you because I wanted the kick from the sugar, and I put some food in there, and then you get back in and you keep driving again. But it's not the road to success, is it? Because one of the reasons, I know my sleep apnea and the problem with my sleeping is the weight I carry. So dare I use the term, it's a bad road to drive down, isn't it? You're on a flogging to nowhere with that, aren't you?
Yeah.
So can we step through the steps for what advice you give to your drivers and workers in regards to fatigue on the road?
Yeah, well, interestingly, one of the things we did as we went around the adoption of that technology was because that's when the events actually happen. So the best thing to do is prevent it from actually happening in the first place. And a lot of that's got to do with what people are getting much more cognizant of at the moment is around sleep patterns, and that's definitely one of the things that's a key thing for individuals, and understanding what their sleep patterns need to be, and making sure that they've adopted their lifestyle for whatever they need to do with respect to work. So you need to potentially adjust one or the other. If, as you said, I think you talked about burning the candles at both ends, you can only do that for a very, very short period of time. If you want to do that ongoing, it's not going to have a good outcome. So if you want to have a certain lifestyle, then certain things are going to be difficult to do. If you want to have a certain career, then there's certain lifestyle changes that you need to make. And one of those is around sleep and managing those sleep patterns, making sure you get more than the 4 hours per day. And how do you get good sleep? People are becoming much more aware of those sort of things now. So it seems a bit passé for me to say that now, but things like not having caffeine just before you end up going to sleep. Don't have stimulation. Don't let the last thing you do read those emails that are coming from that are difficult, from either coming from the bank or coming from work, or anything that sort of stresses you out. Don't do that as the last thing just before you go to sleep, because it makes it very difficult for you to actually have those restful sleeps.
Putting a bad thought in your head before you shut your eyes. That's that thing, isn't it? And emails can deliver, as you said, bad messages, can't they?
Yep, can also be some good ones, but because you don't know, it's best just not to look. So
I don't reckon they let you know if one tats at 11:59, do they? They tend to, good news, nothing good comes into your phone after 10:30, I reckon.
I'd love to be proven wrong. That'd be great.
And so, and exercise and all that kind of stuff. And I hope people don't think we're listening. I know we're stating some of the obvious stuff, and I'm going to dob myself in here because it's easier to do. So again, the worse I ate and the more soft drink I had, because I was an on-road sales rep, right? And so that was, and I was driving every day and doing fair distances, not like long haul drivers, but I'd do 300 or 400 kilometres a day. But I was getting up at 5:30 in the morning and hitting the road and go to our depot, and I'd get the stuff in the back of my car and off I'd go. And I was a country sales rep,
Yep.
So, and again, playing in bands at night. So the truth is, I'd be up for very long, singing and dancing in shows, and it just meant long days into long nights and short sleeps, and then back up and doing it all over again.
Yep.
So I didn't find the time for the exercise, and I'm doing the soft drinks and everything else. So there's the food, there's the healthy food, and we've spoken to nutritionists and everything else, and there's some obvious information there. And I think people know the answer. It's whatever fuel you're putting into yourself is how you will feel. And if it's bad food, you'll feel bad ultimately. And if it's good food, you'll feel better eventually, Yep. But the exercise stuff too, we've been talking about, doing a little bit of exercise and all of that, and doing a few laps around the truck before you get in, all of that helps fatigue as well, doesn't it? And I know, again, they're obvious steps, but we want to remind people, we know they're obvious, so how about you do them,
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's not only obvious, but also don't get yourself locked into the cycle that I haven't done it for the last couple of days, so doing it today is not going to make a difference. So every little bit sort of helps. Every lap that you don't do it is the lap that you're not sitting on the couch. So it's really good to sort of try and get into that sort of process. And I've seen some really good examples of drivers and other personnel that are able to spend some of their breaks and do things like stretching and at least moving around and moderate exercise to try and keep those body movements happening and to try and get a bit more activity into the role, but then also organise for when you can actually do exercise. It's a challenge for not only the long distance drivers but also anyone else that travels. So people who work interstate and those sorts of things. That anything that pulls out the rhythm. So try and find something else that can do the same thing in a simpler way. So do you bring the exercise bands with you instead of being able to, if you don't have time to go to a gym, bring some of those stretchy bands with you.
Oh, see, it's the first time anyone's mentioned the stretchy bands.
Okay.
I've been given the stretchy bands for a bit of rehab on the shoulder and some sore limbs. That's a great thing because that's easy to fit in the cab. I mean, don't even need a sleeper cab for that. You can fit the stretchy bands anywhere in a truck.
Yeah, so, look, I don't want to cast aspersions on you, but I'm getting to an age that I'm starting to need some rehab as well, and I do a bit of interstate travel, and I've got the stretchy bands. They fit into the suitcase, and you can do them just while you're watching TV or something else like that. So it's actually quite a good way of getting the activity at the same time whilst you're trying to wind down.
I have to ask, you, Rick, when you've done the stretchy band thing, sitting down in the hotel room or whatever, have you done the bicep curl where it unhooks from your foot and hits yourself straight in the face?
No, I haven't, but I have seen someone else do that one. So that's avoided me having to do that one.
It's a bit of a favour of mine to Google the stretchy band exercise errors.
Yep, absolutely.
Where we get whacked in the face, yeah.
The one for me is the one that's on the back of the door handle.
No,
it comes off the back of the door handle.
No, see, there's one that clipped on a door. Yeah, and you used to lean back.
Yep.
Yeah.
You've got to be careful that the door's actually strong enough to be able to do that one for you.
Yeah, and number two, when someone walks through, have you seen when someone walks through the door?
No, I haven't.
Oh, man, it's pure joy. Not for the person that's doing the exercise. There's one where you put it over the door and shut the door.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's completely reliant on the fact that the door stays shut.
Absolutely, it does.
Doors, by their own nature, are designed to be opened, and quite often people do that without your permission.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I'm not suggesting people should Google it, but I reckon it's worth the Google. Why drivers and warehouse staff need permission to pause is something that you've tackled and said before. I'm interested to hear your comments around that because it sounds so obvious, but it needs to be said out loud, doesn't it?
Yeah, look, it's interesting. I guess you think about how are we able to sort of facilitate for people to have a safe environment in all sorts of ways. Physical safety in the tasks that they do, but also mental safety and how they're able to talk to others, etc. But with the safety component, one of the key things is around giving the individual license to be able to pause and not feel there's going to be retribution for that pause. And so you don't want to tell people to say you've got to pause at these particular times. There might be individual circumstances when they need it, and it's really about giving them license to do that. Let people know about that. Try and manage around it so they're not done at an inconvenient time, but absolutely give people license to do it and not have retribution for it. So key thing for that is really how you respond to it and letting the workforce know that in supporting them around that, you'd be trying to look at if it becomes a recurring type thing and someone's having an issue sort of on a daily basis, what's the underlying cause of that? Is there something else that we can do to try and assist to try and address that, as opposed to then say, hey, no, that's not the right outcome that we want. You just got to fix it.
Yeah, because it's that interesting thing, isn't it, that when employers are employing drivers, they need to know and they need to check that they've got the right license to control a heavy vehicle or a vehicle of any kind. But what a pity there's not a license to know how to control your own well-being and your own mental health.
Yep.
And that, in order to be optimistic for a moment or positive, is it fair to say you've seen positive change over the years? You've been in the game for decades now, yeah. The change from where it started to where it is, and again, I know we're trying to improve things more, but just to be optimistic for a moment, has it changed so much from where you started?
Well, absolutely. I am very optimistic around the trajectory of where it's at, and I look at things that have changed over the decades. And unfortunately, yes, I have been around for decades enough. So thanks for reminding me. But
you look young enough to me, mate. And it's a podcast; they can't see either of us.
Oh, excellent! Thank you very much. But There has been a significant change, and then you can see that not only in the way the policies, but also just the general discussions that you get around sleep, well-being, mental health, etc. Go back 30 years, they weren't really on the agenda so much, and you'd hear more phrases like "suck it up" or "tough it out" and all that sort of stuff. You don't hear that so much anymore, and what you tend to get now is you tend to get an environment where we want people to be able to raise it, and generally you'll find that there's support from family, friends, and work colleagues around it. I've seen lots of positive examples where people have raised things, been pleasantly surprised around the support that's been available for them, and then had that positively impact them. And that's one of the key things, is that just sort of self-reinforces, and I think that's been what's happening over the decades.
So that's us being optimistic. If I can go more pessimistic, what things do you think need changing more so? What stuff are you focusing on? What changes need to be made now, or what more can we do from here?
Yeah. Probably reinforce some of the things we have been talking about. The license to be able to sort of say stop, put your hand up, get that out. I think things like the Healthy Heads Trucks and Sheds is fantastic with respect to some of the sponsorship and being able to sort of get it out there. So anything we can do to promote it and get people to understand how they might be able to help look after their own well-being, because what becomes really difficult is if you don't know that someone has some wellbeing issues. So the key thing for me is be curious and work with a lot of people and colleagues to try and understand what's normal and what's not around this person's behaviour, because what you tend to find is that person's behaviour changes in a way that people notice, and what we really want is you want people to take it from just noticing to saying, actually, okay, I've noticed this, is there something we can do to help you? And most often, the response is actually, yeah, thanks for raising that, and then something ends up coming out of that. And so I think what we can do more of is, as individuals, be curious around that and encourage others to be curious around it, and then support others when they do raise it.
So that's a great point you've made, and and there's two bits to that. That's great for employers to hear that they should be doing, but also great for employees to be cognizant of in themselves, in their own behaviour, because you've made it so clear, that point, that if there's a change in their behaviour, and it's not they're wearing a different coloured shirt or they change their baseball cap. I know we're talking about characteristic change or patterns of change and what they would normally do, sit with a certain group of people and have lunch every day, and now they're out of that group, and we've heard I know we've spoken to different people and different experts about what that change can look like. But yeah, so number one, your reminder that what you do and what employees need to do is to notice when something's changing, and that potentially that could be the first flag of someone in trouble. But for the individual, there'd be people listening to this right now in a warehouse, on their headsets or in a truck in their cab, who may not even know that they're at the start of a downward journey with their mental health, because they've started avoiding things or avoiding certain conversations, or have changed things that aren't for their own benefit. In fact, they're avoiding something because they're embarrassed or have some kind of fear around something, or a disappointment in themselves, or some kind of nervous energy around something, so they're avoiding certain things. Because for many, that is the start of a bad mental health journey, isn't it? If we're going to talk about it in trucking terms, that's turning down a dirt track. That's an unsurfaced road where there's going to be nothing but dust and trouble, isn't there? So you look for those changes. Can I ask you, firstly, what are some of the changes you've observed or you look for that are a change in the wrong direction for an individual?
You've mentioned some really good points in your conversation there, and I think some of the key ones is around what people do to try and avoid things, and that's probably the first bit of behaviour that you start noticing is withdrawal, and they don't engage as much with their work colleagues, don't engage as much in the task, etc. And they just try and avoid things in general. So that's probably the first thing to start notice. You do, depending upon how quickly or how acute the sort of the challenge that the individual's facing, it can be just a mild sort of an avoidance, or it can be then they have some absences from work, or they become very agitated very easily through work. So it's really any behavioural change, and then trying to understand what's causing that. It's also asking people to try and self-assess around, do they notice that things have been changing? And I think it does help, unfortunately, with the decades, having exposure to not only work colleagues, but then also family and friends that have had those sorts of things. I think over time, you start seeing those things and being able to, I guess, characterise and understand them as indicators that something might not be right. So really what would be great, similar to a safety sort of thing, is how do we get people to look for those and be able to address and identify those before they've had many years of experience of others going down that path. So it's how do you short circuit that learning piece, that you get a lot of people that go, oh, I'm really passionate around this because I've been involved in this and this and this and I've seen it. Ideally, it'd be great to get that knowledge and understanding without actually having to go through the trauma of that you've seen with some others.
So a question I'd like to ask our guests is how they go about communicating. So just to get an idea, how many drivers do you oversee?
So it's interesting. So what we do in so my role currently doesn't have specific drivers right underneath. We have carrier partners that have hundreds and hundreds of drivers.
Right, yeah.
So they are on our site and we treat them as though they are ours, but they are actually our carrier partners' drivers themselves. But my previous role has had truck drivers specifically for me when I used to work at a transport organisation. I used to have crane drivers when I used to run a crane logistics business as well. I used to have FIFO people as well. So right at the moment, I oversee a network of deliveries and transport, but it gets done by a number of different carrier partners with us. But there would be thousands of truck drivers amongst the entire network.
And warehouse staff as
well?
Oh,
correct. Thousands of network staff. So there's over 30 odd DCs within the network. Each of those would have several hundred people at the DC. So there's a large contingent of individuals, and a lot of them all of them have a different life story to tell. All of them have potentially different shift patterns. All of them have different needs, etc. So it's really, as I said, the role that we can play is how do we get as many people to be able to understand and identify those things, because one individual's not going to be able to sort of solve it all for everyone. But if we get everyone to understand that there's a safe environment to do that, how do we then, I guess, get that multiplying effect with everyone being able to identify it?
So the question that I alluded to before that I ask everyone is what in your experience has worked when you spot an employee or a mate or a co-worker whose heads down, patterns have changed, you've noticed they're withdrawing from a group. What's the best first step, have you found?
It's interesting. The first step's curiosity and acknowledgement without judgment. And it is a challenging one, and I've had more success sometimes than others, but it shouldn't stop you always having a go at it. And also just understanding that not everyone's going to react the way you'd expect them to react, and not everyone's going to react the way you think you would react in those sort of circumstances. So for me, the best way is really just showing some empathy, that you recognise or suspect that there's something that's going on. Leave the door open for them to be able to disclose that there's something that's going on. And if they disclose straight away, that's great. That then goes down a path that we can then start working on. If they don't, and sometimes they don't, but you still suspect quite strongly that there's something there, repeat that. Don't necessarily let the first conversation go and then let that be it and think, yeah, you've done your job. Because if you know in the back of your mind that there's likely to be something that's going on in the background, you're probably more likely than not correct. And even if you're not, I've not had an individual come back and say, geez, I'm actually offended that you're actually concerned about my well-being. So you don't get a bad reaction. At worst, you generally get avoidance.
It's a great point, isn't it? There's no penalty for getting it wrong, is there? When you go, is everything okay? And they go, yeah, mate, I'm fine. And you go, great.
Yeah.
There is no penalty, is there? They don't go, mate, I'm fine. I'm very offended you've asked. That's it. Never talk. It's such a good point that to get it wrong is still completely fine, if not more than okay. And I guess if you are checking on someone's well-being and they are genuinely okay, what it does flag to them that you're interested in them, which keeps them, dare I say it, in good mental health, knowing that at least people are paying attention. Or more to the point that they would then know that down the road, when they're not feeling okay, when they're not travelling all right, that they know you're someone that they can come to go, actually, you know what, you asked me a few weeks ago if I was all right, and I was, but now I'm not. That may be the case. But the other one is, I guess, and again, to your point, that having asked them once doesn't mean you've got the right answer, or they've trusted you enough or felt ready to come to you, that it is a great point that we've got to remind ourselves to maybe ask again, and maybe finish off the sentence with, yeah, no worries. Look, if you ever want to talk, my door's always open. That's that. We say make sure that it's open for them to come back to. But I mean, you might literally have to say, you can take 5 to come to me, take that time out, take a pause, which you've said before, that, we've got to accept that, employees that may need a chance to pause, to say at any point during the day, if you need to come back, I'm still here.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing it can also do is that it does leave the door open if they do have some future issues, but it also gives them some license to actually ask that same question of some of their work colleagues as well.
Yeah, pass it on.
So they think that, yep, it's a valid way of sort of engaging with it, because they, as I said, I've never had someone say that they've been offended by it. So they're not going to feel like that's going to offend anyone else if they ask that same question. As long as you do it from the right purpose and really showing some empathy for it, then like I said, I've not had a bad outcome out of it.
We should call it the well-being baton, shouldn't we? That we pass on the well-being baton. That the other thing I haven't really thought about, but now that we're talking about it in this way, that if you say to someone, you know, how you're travelling, and they go, I'm travelling all right, but thanks for asking, mate, I appreciate that. That it shows them they've actually just been through a really short training course on how easy it is to check if someone's okay.
Yep.
So then they see someone's shoulders down, be it physically or emotionally, and say to them, hey, how are you travelling? And they might go, I'm doing okay.
Yep.
But then it trains two people down that line. I mean, the only good thing to come out of COVID was we found out how fast something can spread. I reckon that's the only thing that I thought was great about COVID, is we found out from human contact how quick something could get right around the planet.
Yep.
And what if dare I say it, the wellbeing baton was the thing we passed on, that every time we show someone a bit of care and consideration, they go, oh, that's how simple that is to do. So that, and then when they say, mate, I wouldn't know what to do, and you go, well, what did I ask you, mate? I just asked if you were doing all right. And you went, yes or no, just do what I did.
Yep.
If you see someone in trouble.
Yep.
Is that fair to say?
Look, I agree. It's interesting. The other thing I think that with the COVID piece was how quickly people went on to Zoom. And why did they do that? Because they needed that connection. So we were talking earlier about the isolation and avoiding. People needed that connection. So therefore, if they couldn't get it physically by saying g'day and being in the same place, they tended to do that by having video calls. Now, video calls aren't as good, but it was certainly I guess an example that people need that connection space as well. And
more than a phone call, it's funny, wasn't it? You didn't want to see the face that the voice is coming out of. I mean,
Yep.
It says us on a podcast, I
Yep.
know, but this is, we've got people in warehouses and great humans in trucks, and that's why we're doing this as a podcast. We can't have them staring at a TV while they're on the open road. Yep. Or walking around forklifts. But yeah, seeing a face, that is that connection. I keep saying it during my journey with Healthy Heads, is that connection, it just keeps coming up. Connection is, and it's 48% apparently of the problem, if you will, in mental health scenarios. That 48% of what it is about connection. And based on that, I almost feel like I should do my job and make sure that 48% of the podcast is focused on connection.
Yep.
Because all of you, and you as an expert, you've been doing this for a while. You're in this space. Your eyes are upon the prize of this problem, if you will, in trying to get everyone as good as we can get them with the skills we've got. But it just always comes back to connection. So that the reason I want to keep saying it out loud is because someone now that might be listening going, I am experiencing change. I'm withdrawing from things. I have some reservations about things, and I'm backing away from things I wouldn't have. That I kind of feel like we want to say to them, in fact, I will say it now, is that one thing you should be checking on is, are you making connections? Are you continuing connections, or do you need to make some new ones to start to feel better about yourself? And because I just don't, until I started working on this project, if someone said to me, how important do you think connections are? I would have said very important, of course, but I might have thought it was more of a personal journey, or that something that happens just inside the person's mind. So when I've had vulnerabilities, it's been something that in my mind, that I've generated in my own head. So it's my problem that I've caused, and I've got to figure it out. But I'd never factored in that 48% of it, nearly half of the problem, is that I may have had a problem with connections I've had, or lack of connection, or someone's that I normally talk to, people have been through breakups, or they've got some friends that have gone overseas, or whatever the case may be, that has them slowly talking to less and less people. Or, as we know, for so many of our workers that are stuck in those trucks on their own, and we've spoken to truck drivers who get to a spot where they're out of communication for 4 hours, like phone and two-way, like UHF, unless they've got sat phones, like they're just out of contact. Now, the boss can see where they are on a GPS probably, but the driver can't talk to anyone on the road.
Yep.
So connection. So I just want to say out loud to anyone listening, if that's something that when we're saying that starts to make you go, yeah, I'm losing some connections, that's one of the first things we want you to kind of get sorted or get onto.
Well, I think great conversation, great point to make, and I absolutely agree around that connection phase, and I think you mentioned marriage and those sorts of things as well. There can be all sorts of things that challenge that. FIFO work is another one that ends up sort of challenging that style of thing. But again, anyone that is listening, just encouraged to make that connection. And the good news about that is I've got a lot of experience of people who have reached out to those connections to ask for advice, and then that has been a support network for them. And so I've seen a lot of evidence where that fear of overcoming something has been well and truly gone once they've made that connection with someone, and then there's a support group around them. They'll get work colleagues or family or friends. You'll generally find that once someone reaches out around that, they'll get some support, and they'll be pleasantly surprised around how people respond to that. So I do encourage anyone that is feeling like that, do reach out.
Now, just so that the people listening, the employees know that we're on their side here, there's something I want to say, because there's employers listening to this as well.
Mm-hmm.
That might manage a DC, a warehouse, or some transport company. But just so that the drivers and warehouse workers know that we're on their side, there's something you've said, which is such a great point, and that is that there are no trophies, there's no awards, there's no badges or medals of honour for pushing through. In any sense, like pushing through, being tired, for fatigue management, whatever the case may be, pushing through anything that when the trucks are due for service and the forklifts in the factories, they get their service, they just do, they're probably rostered on. There's someone's got a book somewhere that says that truck's due for a service. Yep. It's an obvious thing to say. But, you have said there's no trophy, I think is that what you said, or there's no awards, there's no badge of honour for pushing through. Now, that's why I say I want the employees to know we're on their side with this podcast, that there may be some small operators who go, well, hang on, we don't want to be telling drivers they can take a break. We've got parcels that need to get there, and we do. But it is a good thing to know that for the employees and the drivers and warehouse workers to know that there's not a trophy, there's not an award for pushing through something that you're really struggling to push through with, be it mental health or fatigue, that the net result can be quite dire if you're just trying to push through.
Yeah, my way of putting it is that there's certainly no trophies for it, but there's lots of consequences.
There you go, yeah.
So if you do that, it's more likely that it's not going to have a good outcome than it is going to have a good outcome. So don't sort of take that risk associated with it. And if there should be trust between the employer and the employee, that conversation can be had. And as I've said earlier, if you do find that it becomes a frequent challenge, then there's something that's potentially underlying that needs to get addressed, and that's in the best interest of the employer and the employee. So I absolutely agree that there's no desire, I would think, from an organisation to try and push through to then sort of put individuals or others at risk, because the tasks that the people who might be listening to this, the tasks that they're doing has some inherent risks to them. And what we don't want to do is we don't want to have an individual self-assess themselves and push through and then put themselves or others at risk, because the task that they're doing is quite important and can have pretty significant consequences. And I've seen what those consequences can lead to, and they're not great. I've seen some very fortunate instances where people have fallen asleep, and thankfully no other parties have been involved, no other injury, no significant injuries have occurred, but that's by absolute good luck, not by good management.
Yeah.
And so the story always is that you didn't need to push through. What was the reason for doing that? And people justify the reasons for that, and they justify it for unreasonable circumstances on themselves. They're putting pressure on themselves when it's not required, and in actual fact, it's the worst thing to do.
Yeah, and I imagine there's many and varied reasons as to why they push through, of which hardly ever does the excuse or reason stack up against the negative outcome of they've come off the road and kind of injured themselves or worse. The one thing that I can't help but think some individuals out there might think that the big companies don't care. To them, they're with such a big company that they're a small number and they don't care. The more I talk, the more I find that's not the truth. In fact, Australia Post, we're in the building as we speak. We are doing a podcast inside the Australia Post building, who have volunteered this space for us to do this podcast, and are in fact behind, Healthy Heads. Lindsay Fox, obviously they're behind it. The big organisations are coming forward to go, no, we want to be a part. In fact, literally, they support this very podcast we're doing and pay for it. So is your experience of the bigger organisations, without a doubt, seeing the benefit and want this to work for all?
Oh, absolutely. It was. There's no doubt at all. One of the things you talked about earlier in the podcast was around what's been the evolution over the last few decades, and absolutely, I can see there's much more social responsibility being thought of as from the larger organisations, and clearly they're investing in that, and there's really good reasons for doing that from an ethical point of view, but there's also some practical good reasons around doing that as well, and the fact that they happen to both get a good outcome together is just harmony, right?
Yeah.
Where it makes sense. If you've got a happy, healthy, and safe workplace, it's going to end up probably going to be a better workplace as well. But there is no doubt that the larger organisations have definitely got that on the agenda, and I've seen that continue as I've progressed through my career. And the larger organisations, and I've had exposures to all sorts of them, whether they be in the mining industry with the BHPs, the Rio Tintos, the current place on that, Primary Connect and Woolworths, and a whole lot of large organisations have that on their social agenda for a lot of good reasons, and they do support it.
The one thing I've realised is that there's a lot of people listening to this that won't know how bad it was. This is going to be a weird thing to include in the podcast. We'll make it a short bit because it doesn't help, because we're looking in the rear vision mirror here. How bad, for drivers under the age of, 30, they may not realise, some of the old men and women out there that'll be going, mate, you don't know how good you've got it. How bad was it? Like, to talk about how far we've come just for a moment, like, Tell me all the bad bits. We all know that before, people could drive through the night and they could stay in the truck as long as they wanted. There's all that kind of, how bad was it? Just as a reference to how far we've come.
Oh, it's unfortunately I could regale you with stories of things that have happened in the past, and they're sort of useful when you're having an individual one-on-one conversation. But there's so many that I'm not too sure where to start.
Where to start?
But essentially, it was never a topic of conversation, and it was almost, not only was it not encouraged, it was almost frowned upon. So that's probably the major shift that I've seen, is that where previously it was actually, as I said, I think I used the words previously, like, you've got to suck it up or carry on and that sort of stuff.
Tough it out.
Tough it out. Yeah. They're the things that used to be said going back 30 years.
One thing you talk about is the power of peer support. Can you talk to me about that? Because it's such a good point.
Yeah, it's nothing gives me better joy than having some work colleagues come up and say they think there's someone else that's in need, that they've actually raised it with them and they need some support, and they're here to help them through that support. And for me, that's just fantastic. And particularly in the driving community, I've seen that come up where they've noticed that there's a challenge. So they've noticed some of those warning signs, so that people being withdrawn and those sorts of things, and either they've identified it so that I or others can raise that with the individual, or they've actually already spoken to that individual, and the individual's feeling comfortable to raise it with them and to get support indirectly through them, but not directly through the employer. I don't mind, as long as they do actually reach out, and that does actually end up happening. So I find that can be a very powerful way when they do get the peers to support. It's whoever they feel comfortable with to be able to, I think you used the word trust. Ideally it'd be great to trust the employer, but if not, trust your colleagues and get them to support you.
I mean, it's in the olden days, you just call it mateship, wouldn't you?
Yep.
You do it for a mate.
Yep.
And it might be an interesting thing to kind of, redefine what mateship is in a workplace. As in, we all know what it is to be a good mate outside of work.
Yep.
We all know what we do for our mates, but the mateship is, and I guess it's not putting the rely, you don't want to rely on the workers to make sure it's a safe workplace. That's, in theory, that's the job of the employer. But surely as a human, we should all accept that if someone's listening to this and then, thank goodness, they're not themselves in trouble at the moment with their mental health, that we're asking everyone to do exactly as you've suggested. Look around as a mate at everyone around you, rather than saying, this, if they are in an unfortunate situation where they're thinking, my employer's not doing enough in this space.
Yep.
Well, it's not a money thing. It's a human contact thing, isn't it? It's not. There's not a check that comes in that helps mental health. You can't pay $100 to get $100 worth of brain health. It's just not how it works. It is that thing of mateship that sometimes it actually, the workplace does need to rely on friendship and mateship and camaraderie to go, we've got systems in place to help all the staff here, but we need the help of all the staff to help all the staff.
Yep.
Again, to go back to that, the COVID example of the only thing good to come out of it was that things spread so fast.
Yep.
If every pair of eyes, being that everyone has two eyes, we can all be a pretty good spy camera system for mental health in our workplace, can't we? Like, forget the cameras in the truck looking at one pair of eyes. If all of us are looking at every person in our workplace going, we're all looking out for each other, literally looking to see if anyone's struggling, and then you can report, as you've said, that peer reporting coming in going, one of my mates is struggling a bit. I guess if he was going to come to me, he would have by now. And I've asked him a few times. He says he's okay, but I'm not sure that's the truth. Can we keep our eye on him? I'll try and, what's in place that he can go to if it's not me he feels comfortable with, because we might be too close and he might see it as a shameful thing, or she might see it as a shameful thing, or I may not be the best person to talk to because of my personality type. What's in place for them? If those kind of conversations are happening, then everyone becomes a part of the mental first aid kit, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And that relates back to sort of what I was talking about earlier, when you're wanting them to be able to keep an eye on their peers as well and work colleagues, because it just multiplies the effect of that. And there's all sorts of support mechanisms around, as you talked about, organisations investing into that. Some of it will be some specific programs which have been set up. Some of them will be free ones which are around. Some of them will be might be an app around a 24-hour call, etc. That you can actually a lot of organisations nowadays actually have an app that an individual can actually talk to and connect to 24/7. So that's again another way. So it's really just trying to make sure that the workforce is understanding of what options they've got, or which one works best for them, because it's not one size fits all. So some might like to talk to a particular individual, some might talk to a colleague, some might talk to might want someone that's anonymous at the end of the telephone call.
Yeah, 100%. And sometimes I think that is the case, isn't it? People don't, for whatever reason, and we'd love to think that'll change over time, but they and wrongly feel ashamed for their circumstance, and a bit of anonymity might be the first way in for them to get themselves help. And if that's what they want, then that's what we want them to be able to get access to.
And I've seen some great stats with some of those ones which have been provided by those organisations. You sit there and go, you don't hear about individuals so much using it, but then you've got the feedback from those providers that say, here's a number of people that have actually rung up and actually had an intervention around something. And that's just fantastic that those individuals have actually chosen a way to get some support for themselves. But there's lots of them that are around. There's the Beyond Blue and all those sorts of things that people can deal with. But just find whatever's available and reach out to that, whatever works for you.
And sometimes, as they say, you've got to leave the door open for them to walk through, don't you?
Absolutely.
Mate, there's a story that I know about you helping a fellow workmate or a mate with addiction, which is something that obviously comes up a lot with drivers and with workers, and to be honest now with society. How did you find out? How did you help? How did you get them through that journey?
Yeah, look, that was an interesting. It was very acute. That whole experience, and it was at a time when the drug and alcohol policies were sort of being developed, and it was still sort of new to me, having to manage through those sorts of things. I was quite reasonably young at the time, and had an individual that was working for me, and he was actually addicted to quite heavy drugs. Actually, it was methamphetamine that he was addicted to, and we had a process where you could outlay that you've got an addiction, and then there'd be ways that we might be able to help and support you through that. And that was really interesting that this individual had the courage to actually go through that. But we'd also made it very clear that it's like a contract in amongst that we can provide some support and help for you around that, but we need you to really buy into this, because as you know, it can be a very difficult thing to manage through addiction.
Very, yeah.
But this individual was very invested in doing that, and had a lot of good purpose about why they wanted to be able to beat the addiction. They had a young family, and they were very, very concerned around that. They were also concerned with the young family. How do they provide for that young family? So obviously work became very important to them around that, and they couldn't afford to lose that. Particularly when you're addicted, it'd be very difficult to get another sort of job. So it was I guess a crucible moment for that individual about how they sort of dealt with it. And I was fortunate enough to be within an organisation that was able to work with that and go through that process. And it was difficult, to be honest. In some instances, it was quite raw when you've got an individual that's obviously at the edge to be able to have to be addicted to those, but incredibly rewarding at the back end of it. So it's a fair bit of effort, but at the back end of it, you've actually got someone who is just incredibly grateful they've been given the experience and support for that, and they could get to the other end of it. So not only see the light of it, but actually get through that and be able to manage it. And I don't think it's something that necessarily ever going to be, it's never going to not haunt them from going forward, but they've been able to sort of break that addiction and be able to sort of function correctly and understand what are some of the causes for it. And like I said, that's just incredibly rewarding to be able to do that. But it did require the individual to sort of fess up around that and then be committed to it.
A heck of a thing for people to get over addiction. You know, James Taylor famously called it the monkey on his back. He had a heroin addiction, the singer James Taylor, and you know, it's such a great description because it was a monkey on his back. They're not easy to get off if they want to hang on. And mates, you know, I came from, most of the truck drivers I dealt with in the earlier part of my life was through rock and roll. And back then things were different. So we, you know, when we're doing shows like U2, you know, there'd be 78 trucks and they'd have 2 or 3 trucks at the rear that were just prime movers waiting in case someone had a breakdown. But there was like 70 odd trucks on the road, and no one's ever turned up to a rock concert and heard this announcement: I'm sorry, folks, we're just not ready for you. It's never happened. The show must go on. So the schedules on those things were unbelievable. And just everything had to get there, and everything had to get there in an order, because so the ground crew get everything set up, and then the truss has to, you know, the stage has to go up, and the truss has to go up first, and then the lights go on, and so the rigging, and then the lighting, and then all the staging gear comes in last, and then the band equipment. There's a definite order it has to happen in, and it can't happen in any other order. So trucks have to come there in exactly the sequence they're supposed to arrive in. And out of that, it came huge schedules and lots of overnight and you know, long runs. Everything was overnight because they'd have to wait for the concert to finish before they started to pack it up or do the load out. So yeah, seeing addiction at that level, you know, there was so much of it, and it started off as what they thought was a work tool, and then it became something else. So it's you know, for anyone that's been near it or seen it, it is truly a monkey on their back that doesn't want to get off, isn't it? So it's but knowing what a great story for you to go, that if someone is willing to put their hand up and go, I have this as an issue, and that's the thing. It becomes an addiction, it becomes an illness, and the only way to get help is to put your hand up and go, there's something wrong here. And you know, if the truth is, employers are happy to help them get through that, and if it's not your employer, you know, put your hand up and try and seek help somewhere, because the benefits are enormous. And we've all seen what happens when they don't put their hand up, and it seldom ends well. And then the other thing is, they're obviously terrified about losing their employment, but then sometimes there's so much money required to keep that habit going, and again, ever decreasing circles. So But it is. I don't want anyone to think for a moment that any of us think that it's an easy thing to give up. The only thing I'd love to say out loud is it's worth the effort.
Yep.
But it is a huge effort, isn't it?
Oh, that enormous, and that's why I said just the conviction and courage of that individual to be able to do that, and you could see what he had to go through, and it was over months and months and months. So it's not like it's you go in 1 week and you're fixed. It was you could see the trajectory, which was fantastic, but there were bumps along the way which weren't great and difficult to deal with. But as I said, great courage of him, and fortunately he had support of, again, colleagues, family, and work. So he was very lucky with respect to that, but that's because he asked for it. And so I think really putting the hand up was the best thing to do.
Well, for anyone out there that's listening that's having a go at trying to recover from that, good luck with your journey, and we wish you all the best. And for those that haven't started yet, we'd love you to have a crack and good luck with that journey. But anyone that anywhere in that journey, we're going to say again, good luck with that journey. We can't wait to see you at the other end, because the rewards are so obvious, but not when you're stuck in the cloud.
Yep.
Well, mate, thank you so much. You're a wealth of knowledge, having been in this space for so long, and again, thank you for all your tips. There's some stuff in there that you've actually got me thinking about, which is the thing I love about this podcast. And I hope to high heaven, if you will, that people listening are getting something out of it. And I'm sure they are, because I keep learning stuff. Every person I talk to, I pick up another tip or look at another way of looking at it. And for me, what I've got out of us, if I'm you and me chatting, is the one that's got me is at the start we were talking about these inward-facing cameras that can look into the eyes of someone and see if they're nodding off. But the fact that we've realised that peers, mates in a workspace can be an inward-facing camera looking into the eyes of their mates to see if they're having a bit of a problem, and actually go over and say how you're travelling, or report it to the bosses and go, I think he might be struggling, and can we see what's in place to help he or she? So that's going to be my takeaway, if it's all right that I steal one from you.
No, look, I think you framed it really well. I'm going to steal that one and take that one away as well. So that was really good around that connection. So look, thanks very much for allowing me to be here. Look, I really enjoy it. It was great to meet you. Great to be here on the couch, and really hope that we've been able to provide some benefit or some insight to anyone that's listening.
Yeah, you have. Now, before you go, I can't let you go yet. It's just not possible. There's a few questions we ask people, and it's for a bit of fun. It's just to finish it off. Mm-hmm. And it can be about work or just life in general.
Can you see the fear on my face?
Yeah, I know.
It's changed from something I know about to now. I've got no idea what you're going to ask.
None of it's with malice or ill intent. Or is it? Yeah. We don't know. No, it's just what lets the air out of your tyres. What grinds your gears, be it in the workplace or life?
Well, for me, what lets my tyres out or down would be that if I've let things sort of get to me too much, and then I don't find enough time for myself to actually pump my tyres back up.
Yeah,
that's probably the thing for me. So if I spend way too much time sort of stressing over work or anything else like that, and then realise that that's carried on for a period of time, and you then don't have that release valve, I think that's what probably does it for me. So I think having exercise or motorcycling or something as an out and a release valve, not doing that is what sort of lets my tyres down.
What bike you ride?
Yeah, Ducati 1098.
Hey! Is that dry? Does that thing rattle at the lights?
It does rattle at the lights. It does rattle at the lights.
Dry sump, isn't it? Is that what it is?
Dry sump.
Yeah, they make a heck of a noise. Every time they used to pull up beside me at the lights, I think something was broken.
Dry clutch.
Dry clutch. Sorry, that's what it is. A dry clutch, and it does rattle, doesn't it? But
absolutely it does.
Yeah, and then once it's going and it's up to temp and it's up to speed, everything.
Yeah. Absolutely beautiful.
There it is.
It's going.
Might have a dry sump as well if you don't check.
Yeah, could do. Yeah, that could be a major problem if that ends up occurring. But
what's the thing about your job when you describe your world in logistics? What's the thing about your job that surprises most people?
Well, it's interesting. Probably the breadth of it. Where we've the role at the moment, I'm looking after around 3,000 different stores around the country.
3,000 stores.
3,000 stores among that we service on a daily basis, pretty much. And that goes from all the way from Weipa up in the coast and Gove down to Tasmania. So it takes into account sea, rail, road. So there's a fair bit that's going on. So any natural disaster that happens anywhere, or any infrastructure
impacts your business.
Impacts our business. So that's probably the aha moment for most people. That if you've got the rail going down to WA, you've got a flood up in Queensland, or you've got a cyclone in Derby, just to raise a few of them that happened recently. All of those impact the tasks that we do.
God, that's a huge network.
Yep, she's all a bit of fun.
Makes you some kind of freight god. That's how I see it.
I think that's very, very kind words. I think there's a lot of really good people supporting me and carrying that out.
So here's a final question: would you rather try and back a B double blindfolded, or explain logistics to an in-law or someone who doesn't work in the business?
I reckon try and explain it. To be honest, I've seen the really good drivers back in their B doubles, and they're good at it. And I just don't reckon I'd be good enough to do that.
No, I can't. I could not back it. I can back a semi, but not a B double.
Yep.
I know you're supposed to think the other way.
Yep.
Because when you back it, you got to think the other way.
Yep.
And a B double, you've got to think the other way.
Yep.
You got to think the other way twice.
Yeah, you can see the really good ones, and there's a bit of a competition amongst the drivers too. So if they're across the apron to try and back their double in, you've got the other drivers watching them, keeping tallies on whether they're better than them or not.
Well, mate, I've got an outro to read, and what we do on this podcast is I leave you here for the outro. The reason I explain this is on other podcasts, the thing I hate is they go, so that was so-and-so, and you realise they've recorded that after the fact. I refuse to do it. I do the outro with you here.
Thank you.
So here's your outro, Rick. I hope you like it. Rick's making sure no one gets left behind. Is that fair to say?
Try to.
Yeah, I reckon you're doing beautifully at it. Whether they're loading pallets or hauling cross country.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I reckon we've nailed it. So there's my outro bit. I'm Shane Jacobson, and you've been listening to How You're Travelling. There's plenty more to hear. Just jump into the next episode and make sure to download the Healthy Heads app for practical tips and tools to keep your head in the game. Rick, it's been a pleasure, mate. Take care.
Thank you very much, Shane. Pleasure.
And I keep asking people to do this. Can you say goodbye to our listeners? And then I get the next 1 minute off. Go.
Goodbye, listeners. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
See? He's even doing my job for me. Thanks, mate. If you're doing it tough, don't go it alone. TX, aka This Is a Conversation Starter, offers 8 free counselling sessions for truckies, tradies and blue-collar workers. No cost, no GP referral, no fuss. Just call 0488 846 988. That number again, 0488 846 988. And if you're feeling overwhelmed and need support right away, call Lifeline on 13 11 14. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.